Hello and welcome, folks. My name is Ryan Chapman, and I'm the author of SANS Forensics 528 Ransomware for Incident Responders. This is episode 2. We're doing it. We're going to try to make this a monthly thing of Stay Ahead of Ransomware. This is a live stream series where I and my co-host, Mary, who will be popping on the screen here shortly, are just going to kind of come talk to you with one of our guests about something that's going on in the ransomware realm. Like, what is it that we're dealing with? What is it that we're seeing? Is it that some new group's been, coming around doing crazy stuff? Whatever kind of just we want to talk about. And just, we'd love it to be kind of interactive. If folks have any questions, you can fire that over and our folks can get those over to us. So again, I'm the author of 528. I work full-time as an incident response consultant, been doing it for around 4 years. I work a lot of ransomware and I research a lot of ransomware cases outside of the day job, if you will. And I have with me here, Mary DeGrazia. So Mary, hi, hello. Who are you? What's going on with you?
Who am I? I'm Mary DeGrazia. I live in Arizona along with Ryan out in Tucson. I'm a SANS instructor where I teach Forensics 500, and then the new courses is coming out, this 528 as well. So excited to be here and talk about the latest, greatest, and what people can do about ransomware.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And on our show today, we have the illustrious, the venerable Dr. Danny Quist. Danny, who are you? I've known you for a couple of years now, I guess.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Danny, reverse engineer for a long time, currently working at Redacted. And what I do is I chase down ransomware authors and reverse engineer malware. So that's what I'm here to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you. Danny and I are actually really good buddies. We go on walks weekly. We work out together. It's good having a cybersecurity nerd like in your backyard. It's awesome. We were supposed to be here sitting together holding hands on stream, but he changed his mind. Whatever. No big deal, Danny. So we've invited Danny here today because one of the things we want to talk about is the evolution of ransomware. What's happening that's different, and it's going to maybe pave the way for a whole new generation, which is what we're actively seeing now. Before we get to that, just some notes. The overall series, the point here is, again, 30 minutes, kind of quick and dirty of what we're seeing and our thoughts, and our guests just going off on whatever's in their noggin regarding our topic. Danny has done quite a bit of research for a specific group, and that group, I'll let him mention it and get into it, but that particular group is evolving in a way that Mary, myself, and others in the industry are seeing some of these ransomware actors, make this move. And so before we get into that, I just wanted like a hot minute, if you will, on some big news in the ransomware industry. And there's something I'm actually very, very excited about. There's a ransomware actor who goes by the name of Waza Waka. And so I'm going to put a link. It should pop up at some point. And it is basically for528.com/Waza Waka, spelled like you see right there. All right. So this particular individual has been very, very dominant, I guess, in the ransomware industry, because that's what it is. And this link that we've provided is a breakdown of who this individual is, their online personas, the overall entity. Who is this? It's a human being. You can go to this link. You can see pictures of this person. You can see multiple videos of this person. And if you go to the other link we're about to put up, which is the same link, but with a 2 at the end of it, you will then see an interview that this person gave. And the news and the update is if you go to the same link, but with a 3 at the end of it, you'll see that he was recently indicted in the United States. And for that matter, has made the FBI's most wanted list. What? So many times we get feedback from, people, why are these ransomware actors not being caught? Right? Why do we not know who they are? Oh, we often know who they are. Many of them are very, very well known. It's a matter of, can we do anything about that? Right? So take a look at those links, especially the /Wazawaka3, and kind of get a feel for, who's this silly individual and what is it that this indictment may actually do for those of us who have to deal with ransomware. How can that help us, or maybe not, right? So it's very, very interesting time to see, what extraditions can we actually get from friendly and non-friendly countries, things like that. So I just want to get that out there. And now let's get to the whole point of our discussion for today. Ransomware actors over time have evolved from just being ransomware, right? It may be delivered via email. The original ransomware strain was delivered via a floppy disk, a 5 1/4, like a legit floppy, like wobble, wobble, wobble. We need a soundbite for that now, wobble, wobble, wobble. And was sent out via the mail. And you now have gotten to human-operated ransomware, which we call human-operated ransomware, where as opposed to the ransomware just making its way in and infecting a machine or maybe a small subnet or whatever, you'd rather have humans with their hands on the keyboard who carry out an entire attack campaign against an organization or victim entity. And once they do that, they then do all kinds of the phases that we typically see with advanced persistent threat style of attacks. If you go to for528.com/tactics, just the word tactics, plural, you'll see the MITRE attack tactics, which these actors are following to the T, basically. So we saw that humans started carrying out the attacks, and then we started seeing RAS, or ransomware as a service. So Danny, you've been dealing with this for quite a while now. Can you give us just a quick little breakdown on RAS? What's that concept?
Well, ransomware as a service, it turns out that a lot of these malware authors, especially when you look at, so the group I've been looking at is Beyond Leon. A lot of them are not good at coding because coding is hard, and they make lots of mistakes. So there's been a continual push to sort of outsource that, the same way that you outsource your trash being picked up and that sort of thing. Is you outsource your ransomware service to somebody who actually knows how to code and spends more time working on it, and perhaps has cracked an encryption book in the last 30 years. Those sorts of things is what you're going for there. That's what the ransomware service is paying for.
I'm totally stealing that analogy there that you went with, like damn, your trash picked up. Yeah, I like that. Mary, what groups RAS-wise have you been dealing with, familiar with, researching, etc.? I think you're on mute.
I think I muted and then unmuted and muted again. Personally, I don't spend a lot of time doing attribution. I'm usually doing the forensics and the deep dive and looking at the forensic artifacts. So I will leave it to the other experts to opine on that.
A fun part about that is that many times clients or counsel or whatnot will want to know, hey, what group was this? Knowing what group attacked in a ransomware case can be very, very difficult, because often, just like Danny was talking about, the RAS ecosystem, the model relies on affiliates. And these affiliates are brought in, and they either will pay and lease the software, they'll be recruited actively. Some groups, like the old Babook group, used to have an affiliate program run by a fella named Orange, also known as Wazawaka. He ran one of the largest affiliate recruiting programs that existed. And that's part of like a little tie-in there. But the affiliates, they carry out the attacks their own way, and they're not necessarily beholden to a given group. So we have some feedback if folks could mute real quick. Because of that, when we're doing analysis on cases, we might see something and go, oh, I saw this in a Royal case, an Akira case, just ransomware groups, right? But in reality, you're looking at the affiliate, and those affiliates, they'll bounce and ping back and forth between a number of groups, and then basically just kind of confused who the heck's carrying these things out. One of the ways that we identify the group at the core of the ransomware cryptor itself is because it announces itself, right? The README file says, hey, sucks for you. You got hit with so-and-so, right? So one of the evolution things that we're seeing, is a move away from actual encryption and rather a focus on outright data extortion. So an example, Palo Alto Networks recently put out their ransomware report. It's not even called the 2023 ransomware report. It's called the 2023 ransom and extortion report. Why? Because can we really call a ransomware case where everything is carried out the exact same way? The threat actor gets in via one of the top 3 methods, right? RDP, phishing or software compromise, vulnerability, exploitation, right? They do all the same tools, and they Mimikatz to dump. They do all the things, and you go like, I know that. I know those TTPs. That's ransomware, right? They steal the data the same way. They use rclone, megasync, whatever, curl, whatever it is. But then they don't encrypt. They just drop a README file. Is that ransomware? Danny, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's, you know, the same crime, just a different method of doing it. What has been surprising, especially on ransomware, is it used to be a lot of high effort was put into encryption, but then jerks like me and my friends would go around, or, you know, the good people at Avast would release an decryptor for their software based on this. So, you know, like in the case of Beyond Leon, they started out by, building a Go program that had their encryptor, all of their command and control. And, you know, once you ripped it apart and got down to it and started looking inside of it, it really looked like it'd been written on a Friday night with a 12-pack of beer. And so it's really easy to break that, especially if you make crypto mistakes. And so they just decided, well, you know, extortion is good enough motivation to get people to pay. So we're just going to stick with that because it's cheaper. And they don't get embarrassed.
I think too, as ransomware has become more and more prevalent, you know, especially the larger companies where they're probably going to get a bigger payload, they're learning to do their backups. They're learning to keep them off site, or they're simply encrypting systems that they don't need. Oh, that's just the blah, blah, blah server. We can get that rebuilt in a weekend. We're not going to pay, you know, your $500,000 or, you know, 1 million ransom demands. So as they have, you know, as we've been dealing with ransomware now for what, 5 years? I mean, it was before COVID, right? A couple of years. Companies are putting more mechanisms in place to protect themselves from when this happens. So the threat actors are having to adjust what they're doing to get that payload and hit companies where it really hurts. So now we see them spending, you know, sometimes some more dwell time on trying to figure out, okay, where are those crown jewels at, and what can I do that is really going to hurt this company to increase my chances of getting paid? I worked a case where they targeted their main database that had everything in it, you know, the company data, the client data, and instead of launching the ransomware, they exfiltrated out a copy of the database, and then they deleted every single instance of that database that they could find. So then it wasn't whether or not they could rebuild their environment. It was just this one database that they needed. And that one database was really enough to drive those negotiations in favor of the threat actor.
Thank you for that real world case. That's one of the things that I absolutely love to be able to share when we can, just general details on this is exactly what we're seeing, you know, in the industry. So extortion, but not encryption. Right? Groups coming in and doing these things. So who are some of these groups? Well, if you look back at hold on, it's right in my screen, right in front of me. Oh, Conti is what I was trying to say. One of the largest groups that has been analyzed through and through. They were one of the largest for at least about 2 years, I guess, right? And then when they disbanded, when the brand went away, right? They stopped the Conti brand. What happened? Well, those individuals, they moved to other organizations essentially, and they actually splintered out to quite a few for a multitude of reasons. One of the groups that was kind of spun up from the original Conti, which some folks throw under the Wizard Spider umbrella and some don't, is a group called Karakurt, Karakurt. And Karakurt was the data extortion arm of Conti. That's what they called themselves. It literally, they would say, we are the data extortion arm of Conti. And you're like, wait, what? So Conti is this overall group that has a multitude of facets, whereas one of those is an entity that just goes in, steals your data, drops a ransom note. It's like, hey, you know, this is what you got to deal with now. So Karakurt is still active. They went silent for a bit, but they're active. We also have Ransom House is one. Clop has been around. CL0P is the spelling of Clop, by the way. They've been around since what, 2020 or something, Danny? Maybe before that. They at one point were exclusively doing data extortion, not as in not encryption, but now they're kind of back and forth on it. They're a little wavering. You're like, wait, what? So we also have Beyond Leon. So Danny, what is it that your team saw? We had a group. Awesome. I didn't turn off my alarm. Very well done, Ryan. So we had we had a group that was deploying ransomware cryptors at the end of their attacks, right? And then you folks at your day job, I'll let you kind of speak to your initial article and then subsequent research, and go for it. What you got?
Yeah, so our research into this began with look, basically, we had an incident come in where we were asked to help out and try to address issues going on, and that's where we come to it. My company is more of a pursuit company, so being the bit twiddling reverse engineer, I complement our really rock star analysts and threat intel and open source researchers that go out and actually find these people. So what we did is, what I did is I started to collect pretty much every version of the Beyond Leon, both the backdoor, the encryptor, and then in certain cases, other parts of their infrastructure. And so once we collected all of that, we were able to start to make some determinations about what was going on. The first thing that was difficult was it was all written in Go. And if you're a reverse engineer who's cracked open Ghidra or IDA or my favorite binary Ninja, it is a mess. So that was the first challenge, was getting past that. It's good write-ups on that if you're interested. The second thing was, once we had that, now it's time to start chasing the actors back to where their source is. And we did that by looking at their TTPs, how they changed. And this hasn't necessarily been a sophisticated group. They show signs of sophistication on their initial access, but certainly on their encryption, they just weren't good at it. And they tried their best, but it's if you read Bruce Schneier's Applied Cryptography, you get all sorts of bad habits. And thankfully for reverse engineer, that just makes things awesome. But they weren't able to do that. So I think that they made a logical business decision, because all these ransomware groups are making business decisions, is they decided to say, you know what, that's not working. Let's just stick to what works, which is the extortion, and it's cheap, and we don't have to pay some guy to write an implant for us, and don't have to worry about it.
So I shared the article link in the comments. Oh, there it is. So we've got the /Beyond Leon goes to the original article that your team put together, that you co-wrote on Beyond Leon and their Go-based encryptor. And I will shorten the other URL shortly here. So your team was doing some analysis and research into the encryption methodologies. So can you kind of explain what can go wrong when you quote unquote roll your own in terms of encryption, and what kind of happened in this case?
Right. Well, it's with any of these systems, when you implement, in the case of Beyond Leon, they were using an AES CBC encryptor. And there's a whole bunch of points where you can make mistakes of that with that. And most of the mistakes that I see in ransomware based on this encryption are from where they're copy pasting code that they find in a forum that's like, it'll be something like encrypt function or encrypt data, and they just copy it over without any sort of thing to it, and they change the keys. But there's all sorts of little steps that you have to take in there to make sure that all the encryption is random enough and is secure enough so that it can't suffer from things like replay attacks and brute forcing at very, very easy points. And so that's generally the tactic there. In the case of Beyond Leon, they were making noob mistakes where normally you would put a public key inside of the encryptor. They actually included the private key. So it was a pretty simple matter. Well, I mean, there were steps involved. I don't want to diminish the great work that others have done. But at the few steps, you can decrypt their code with just basically, if you have a copy of the executable, you're good to go. And they didn't, they started by producing a sample for each infected victim and then distributing them that way with good keys and good OPSEC and that sort of thing. But if you include that private key, the door gets opened.
Oopsie poopsie. So the idea is that basically they made a grievous error, right? Or a series of them. And it came out to the point where, oh, okay, well, we can't really use our encryptor right now. So then this group has essentially, now, have they really though, right, evolved, if you will, to not deploying a cryptor or an encryptor, but rather just taking data and extorting, from that degree. So what do you think, Danny? Do you think that they are simply retooling in the background and that they're building out a brand new crypter? Or do you think that they're just going to go ahead and just run with this? Do you think they were maybe just so darn embarrassed that they're like, you know what, forget the encryption, like never mind? Like what are your general thoughts, if you can comment on that?
Yeah, I've unfortunately hadn't had a chance to have a beer with any ransomware authors and that sort of thing, so I can't like speak to their mind. But you know, software gets compromised, and you know, and when places get their software compromised, they don't just stop doing what they're doing. You know, you take a step back and then you reevaluate your techniques. In their case, the economics don't really justify encryption. Because if you put yourself in your shoes, let's say that you're a plucky ransomware author trying to go make a buck, and you know you want to get this done as quickly as possible. If you go in and encrypt a lot of databases, especially as they're running, you can corrupt them. You can cause all sorts of problems. Encryption, especially of very large files, is like the physics of encryption. I don't care how many cores and threads you run, it still takes a while. And so what we saw is that a lot of ransomware authors were not encrypting like a whole terabyte file or database file. They were encrypting, 2 megs in the center of it, just enough to cause it to break, right? And that has been a transition, just because it takes a long time to encrypt a company. And it puts you at risk as the ransomware author, because you have to babysit it while it's there. Anytime you have connections on there, you're leaving a trail for jerks like us to go sniff you out and pull you back. You have to set up infrastructure for each one of those to make sure that you get the command and control back to where you want it. And those are all risk points that come in, and eventually it gets you caught. That's the problem that they're trying to address.
I would be curious too. Also, we talk about encryption, but there's also the decryptor that they have to support, right? Like they have to maintain the keys, correlate those with their clients, provide the decryptor. And, some of them provide, I guess, that customer support on the decryptors, because I've worked multiple cases where the clients will pay for the decryptor, but then, on those really large files, it's just not working. And of course, it's, the most important files that they need, or the most critical servers. So it seems like in addition to supporting the encryptor, they also have to also support those decryptors as well.
Yes, and that got even more complicated when they started moving to exactly what Danny was talking about. Part of the evolution was, it's taking too darn long to run these encryption routines. Let's pick segments of a file. Let's do intermittent, like whatever, right? The royal, most of them out, the larger groups right now, they have a command line argument that will be provided. I'm blanking on which one it is right now, the -P for percent or -EP for, one of the bigger names. And they give a percentage, but then they have to have the routine that's not interrupted, that's able to take the file, chunk it out in sizes, and say like, all right, I'm gonna take this much and I'm gonna encrypt it and then encrypt that. But they have to put markers either in the file or somewhere on the system that indicate exactly how that was done, so it can be reversed out. And if the encryption is interrupted, you can end up with files that can't be recovered. And we have some groups right now who their kind of MO is to basically take the public key that was utilized and put it at the end of the file. But if it doesn't make it to that point of putting that key to the end of the file, you run their decryptor, you can run it all you dang want. It's not going to do anything for you. And so they're running into a lot of, support issues, essentially. So I guess that's one of the positives, right? From their perspective of not having to deal with all that. So
there's a strange honor amongst thieves too. So I've noticed this, and it's something that I put together, and maybe the brain trust here can elaborate on it, but they're very conscious of providing that service at the end that says, we will stick with you and help you get there. We are respectable, trustworthy service. After we've already compromised and stolen your stuff, we help you get back. And some to the point that they not only do they deliver, help with the support of decryption, and there are varying levels of it, but some even give you a nice response, or report. How did we break in? How did we break all this stuff? These are the things that you need to fix. And they consider that to be part of the service that they're delivering to the people there.
Remember, a lot of their victims, they actually call them partners, because that's not salt in the wound. Another thing I wanted to mention and get into here before we wrap it up is that another part of this evolution that we're seeing in the industry is increased chasing. So moving away from encryption, but more so chasing. And the term chaser is utilized on the darknet forums and for recruiting purposes and whatever. It's often exemplified or personified by like a logo or whatever of a fist, basically. And it's basically trying to get people recruited to then go to the victims and chase them, literally chase them down. Give me your money. Give me your money. Give me your money. Why is it important you give me money? I'll tell you why. If you go to FOR528.com/suncrypt, and I'm going to drop it right now into the comments. And then there it is right there. Thank you very much. So if you go there, that will take you to a YouTube video that was archived by the VX Underground folks. They archive a lot of ransomware stuff, by the way. A really good resource to learn more about these actors and who they really are. Shout out to Smelly and crew from VX Underground. But this will take you to a YouTube video of a voicemail that was left by a group called Suncrypt. They're still around, by the way. This is a couple years old. This is not new. However, it's a good example of what we're seeing over and over and over and more now. So you're having these organizations and say they're like, well, we're not really impacted, right? We're up and functional, right? No, X, Y, and Z data has been taken and it will be leaked and or auctioned or whatever. And how is that? Why is that a problem? And how is that going to make you feel? Well, the psychological pressures are increased when they have people calling and leaving voicemails. And they're calling like the victim organizations randomly. They're calling the board members. They're calling investors. They're calling like you freaking name it. And they're calling them. They're calling their joint partners. They're calling their shareholders. They'll just go nuts. They'll email, they'll call, and they're really trying to put the pressure on. So if you haven't yet heard the Suncrypt voicemail, it's my favorite example of the /Suncrypt, see what the heck it is, what it sounds like. What's that pressure sound like? And this one's actually kind of nicer. And it's not, some of these contacts are really mean. They're very mean-spirited. So, all right, let's see. Any closing notes for the episode, Mario? Anything that's in your head about this kind of change to less encryption, more data extortion and chasing?
Well, definitely a comment about the chasing is I think it really scares people. You mentioned that psychological pressure. All of a sudden, when it's no longer someone kind of invading your work environment, to actually get a phone call, usually the next thing else I hear is like, well, what else do we have to be worried about? What else do they know about me personally? I think it really puts a lot of that psychological pressure on. And being on these calls with clients, I can hear that in their voices and the concern. Like we're getting calls, my boss got a call, my board got a call, and it puts a lot of pressure on people.
Absolutely agree with that. Danny, any closing commentary?
Yeah, they're like chasing down customers. I think that is a universal problem, both on the defense and offense side of things, trying to get people to pay their bills and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it makes sense that they have the same problem, especially when it's a service that nobody asked for or wanted or really consented to. Yeah, it's a hard thing. I don't feel for them at all. I have no sympathy, but it's good to know that they have problems like this too.
It's a little refreshing, right? Yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's it for the episode. I don't want to go past the 30-minute mark, so we keep it there. So Dr. Danny Quist, thank you very much, good sir. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, this is Ryan signing off for Mary and myself, saying thanks for watching the episode. Episode 3, we're going to have Megan Roddy on, one of the co-authors of our cloud forensics course. And she's going to come in and talk about where we're seeing data extortion and or ransomware in the cloud environment and how that evolution is kind of shaping up. So join us for episode 3. We'll post details about it fairly soon, and we'll see you then.
Okay.